The focus of today's tutorial is showing you how to make a Chelsea bun, or a batch of Chelsea buns. Chelsea buns are made using an enriched dough, so we're still using the raising agent yeast, we're still using that kneading and proving skill, but we are adding extra ingredients into that dough to enrich it, so it makes it better product with regards to flavour, and it's a sweet product as well. So we're enriching it using eggs, milk in the warm water, and we're also adding sugar before adding fruit as well. So the ingredients we are using today, we've got egg, we've got mixed peel and fruit, yeast, margarine, sugar, bread flour, strong bread flour, and then we've got the mixture of milk with, I'll be adding warm water into that as well. For the equipment, we're using a mixing bowl and a sieve. I will be using my hands to mix that together. You can use a spoon if you prefer not to get your hands too sticky. I've got a whisk because of the eggs, and then we are using a Victoria sponge tin, sandwich tin, to create the Chelsea buns. Just means that they're a little bit like a tear and share. You can roll them individually and just pop them onto a baking tray. If you don't have this, just make sure that you grease it. So first of all, I'm going to line the tray. So I've got square pieces of greaseproof paper folded into quarters, and then I'm going to fold into eighths and then into 16ths so that I get a little fluted shape. And then I use that to measure from the centre, and then I just cut around, and that should hopefully create a quite even round base that I can then put in my tin. So that will be placed inside the greaseproof tin with a little bit of oil before that goes into the oven. The oven is preheated to gas mark 7 or 220 degrees. As with most bread recipes, it's quite a high heat to get that really that heat and that temperature into the bread and to help it to rise. So starting off, we are going to sieve the flour into here. Now the recipe ingredients I've given you, I've actually doubled up my recipe today as I'm doing a couple of batches of the Chelsea buns, as these are being given to a local hospital that's going onto one of the wards for the staff this week. So once we've got that in, we're going to use 2 packets of yeast. For my recipe, yours will just be 1. Adding those in, and then we're making a well. So we're putting that hole in the centre so that we can then start to add all of the other ingredients. So the sugar can go straight in. The margarine can also go in. Use margarine just because it's got higher plasticity, so it's a little bit softer, easy to manipulate. If you're putting butter in it because you don't have margarine, do bring it to room temperature to allow that plasticity to occur so it goes softer, easy to manipulate, easy to mix in rather than having those lumps. Then I'm just going to add some hot water into here as I've got cold milk to get that warmth overall, and that's going to help with activating the yeast. Once I've got that sorted, I'll come back to you on the video and we will continue. Now that my milk and water mixture have been added together, that's a nice lukewarm temperature, I'm just going to add the eggs into the liquid first of all, just to allow me to whisk them in here rather than whisking them in the bowl where the flour could obviously go everywhere. So for the recipe, it is just 1 egg. As I said before, I am doubling my recipe just to make a double batch so that there's more to go around. So once that's whisked in, that can then start to be poured into here. As with most bread recipes, I would reserve a little bit of that mixture, keep that back, and then with your hands or with a spoon alternatively, start to move that around to get that mixture really going and combining. Obviously, it is going to be a bit more mucky, it's got the eggs in there and it's also got the margarine. So we're going to mix it around, and we're looking for quite a soft, slack dough. It won't be the same texture as a normal bread recipe. It's got a lot more rich, soft ingredients in there. So you do need to be careful that it doesn't go too sticky. So just being cautious with the amount of liquid that you put in to start with. So as you can see, it is starting to come together now, but I do need to add a little bit more liquid. Adding a bit more of the egg and milk and water mixture to really start to bring this together. And then once we have this as a ball of dough, we're just going to revert back to a normal bread recipe with regards to the kneading process, which I will start off in a second with you. So we are near enough there now. Just clean around the edge of the bowl to get those extra bits in. And you can see we've got a quite sticky, soft, loose dough there, which I'm going to start to knead. So I just need to put some flour on the work surface, and I'll just quickly run through the kneading process with you. So now that I've got the lightly floured work surface and I've got my dough on the work surface, we're just going to go through that kneading process. So we are stretching out that gluten. There's gluten we should think about as being elastic bands, very tight elastic bands, and we want to give them that flexibility, that elasticity, which will help the bread to rise as that yeast starts to ferment. So we are using the heel of our hands and we are pushing down and away to stretch that dough, turning and pushing. Now, with bread recipes, some of the time it's good to put oil on the work surface. With this being a really soft dough, it is better to use flour just to help it dry it out a little bit, because it can be a very sticky dough. So as we are doing this, we're keeping this bread dough warm, and that will help with the activation of that yeast. So we've added in the sugar, we've still added in the moisture, the warmth is there, and we're adding in that time in a few minutes, because we will then leave this to prove. So I'm going to continue this now for 10 minutes. I'll quickly show you the proving process where that yeast is going to be left to ferment, and then later we will show you how to prepare these Chelsea buns and pop them into that Victoria sponge tin, so that you can see how we do the tear and share, but obviously alternatively you can just use a baking tray as well. The rich dough has now been kneaded for 10 minutes, so now when I'm stretching this dough, it will stretch up, and we're testing it all the time for that, getting to about 10-15 centimetres at least before it stretches and starts to snap. It is a very different texture to a normal bread, so it is softer, a little bit more gooey, so it may not stretch as far, but that kneading process is just as important. Now all I'm going to do, I've not washed it, I'm just going to use my mixing bowl from before. I've put a little bit of flour just to help so it doesn't stick. I'm going to pop my bread dough inside here, and then I'm just going to cover it with a tea towel. You can do cling film if you want to. So just going to pop that there, I'm going to leave that to prove. So the longer the better. I'm going to just do for about an hour today, and then I'll show you the next process. But the longer the better, gives that yeast that full fermentation. Now that I have rolled this out, now yours probably will be about half of the width of this one. All I'm going to do is just spray it lightly with a little bit of oil. If you've not got one of these spray bottles, then you can very easily just use a brush and a little bit of oil, or even some melted margarine. And then because it is a sweet product, we want to add a lovely coating of caster sugar to the bottom of the bread before we then add the fruit. So I'm then going to pour the fruit over and just spread that out, and then that will start to create the filling for these Chelsea buns. So we're just pressing it down. You don't need to have it covered in fruit, it's just that they should be quite spread out. So now that I've got that right the way up to the edges so that all of the mixture can be used, we're then going to roll the mixture. So obviously yours will be a lot more narrow. Mine is quite wide because I've got the double mix. So I'm just going to fold it to start with and then roll. And you want to roll as tight as you can do all the way along to create one large roll, making sure that everything gets kept. And just make sure at the end that you have got that little bit without any fruit, so that we can really stick this together. So once that's rolled, you can then bring that across and really blend that in to the roll so that it holds all the way along like so. Anything that falls out, pop that in, and then that is ready to be prepared. Whilst I've got my spray, I am just going to spray where I'm putting this and pop in the greaseproof paper. And I'm going to do that to both of them. So now I'm going to go back to full screen and show you how we prepare this and pop it into the tin ready to bake. So now that I am ready to cut, I've got my 2 tins ready. Obviously you'll just be working with one if you're following the ingredients. We want to do about 2 centimetres thickness when we're cutting these. So with a sharp knife, cut right the way through, and then we're going to stand them on their end like so. They will not touch to start with, but as they expand in the oven, they will all join together. So we want to go through this 2 centimeters each time, and then you're popping them up onto their ends. If the fruit protrudes over the top too much, do push it down, as obviously the heat, they start to expand with the liquid inside and they can often burn. So we do want them to be lower than the bread, just for that quality finish. So do push them through. I'm sawing again with each one, popping them through. There's nothing else to be done with this other than pop it into the oven before it cooks. Once it's cooked, to add a quality finish, we do drizzle it with some icing sugar and water if you want to improve the quality of the finish. So I will show you that once it has been cooked. So that now is going to go into the oven. They will expand, they'll all join together and will be a tear and share type Chelsea bun that you can see at the end. So this is going to go in the oven now on gas mark 7, 220 degrees, and I'll show you what the finished product looks like and how to decorate. The Chelsea buns have now been out of the oven for approximately 10 minutes, just allowing them to cool before I add the icing on. So the icing is literally icing sugar with water. I've made it so it's got quite a thick consistency to allow me to drizzle. So I'm going to make a little bit of a mess of the work surface around, but that's just to get the effect on the top for that quality finish. So we're going to get quite a lot onto fork, spoon, whatever you've mixed it with. Allow it to get a slight pour, and then you're going to go across in stripes. So again, making a bit of a mess, get that drizzle going, and then all the way across. And what we're doing is just drizzling and leaving that nice line across the Chelsea buns. So once that drizzle starts, go across, and you're just moving from side to side, all the way along till you've coated both sides of the Chelsea bun, and all of the individual buns have got a really nice icing coating to them, like